Good evening. This is, again, the programme about books, and all that happens is just that an extract from a book is read out by Richard Hurndall or by John Moffat, and then the people sitting here try and discover who wrote that particular piece. These people are Bernadine Bishop, the novelist.
Good evening.
Anthony Blond, publisher.
Good evening.
Anthony Burgess, the novelist.
Good evening.
And John Grosse, who's a fellow of King's College, Cambridge.
Good evening.
And the first extract then is read by Richard Hurndall.
Can you say what I say?
I'll say anything as you say, sir, for I know it's good.
Our Father,
Our Father, yes, that's very good, sir.
which art in heaven,
Art in heaven, is the light a-coming, sir?
it is close at hand. Hallowed be thy name.
Hallowed be thy...
The light is come upon the dark benighted way. Dead, dead, your majesty, dead, my lords and gentlemen, dead right reverends and wrong reverends of every order, dead men and women born with heavenly compassion in your hearts, and dying thus around us every day.
Splendid. Bernadine Bishop.
Dickens, Bleak House.
Right for you.
Yes. Death of Little Tom, I would say, isn't it?
Joe.
Joe. Joe, that's right.
You're thinking of Death of Little Nell, perhaps?
No, I'm thinking of Death of Little Joe, of Tom
Yes,
All
quite.
Alone. That's
Of
where he
Tom
comes
All Alone,
from.
yes.
Yes.
Would you have got that, Anthony Blond?
No,
Not within
I
a million
wouldn't.
miles?
Within a million miles, yes. I
Who,
wouldn't
for
have got
instance,
it.
did you think? Just for fun?
I thought there was one echo, forgive me, the first opening thing, I thought it was a comic episode for the first 3 lines of Shakespeare.
Well, it's
That's
good
a
to
million
know.
miles, isn't it?
Anthony Burgess, did you recognise it?
Yes, I got that it was Dickens, but I didn't know which book. I was going to say A Tale of Two Cities first, but that seemed wrong. Possibly Bleak House was written about that time, was it? The tone seems similar. I don't know. But there's an intensity about it which is at the same time relieved by a deliberate exaggeration, which is comic in a special way. It is, I think, purely Dickensian. Of course, it could be imitated. One might even say, no, not Wells. I thought of Kipling, The Light That Failed, or something like that. But Dickens, definitely Dickens.
John Grosse.
Oh, I think unmistakably Dickens, and one would have to be almost as good as Dickens to imitate it. In a way, I'm a bit cross, because this is not typical Dickens, or rather it's typical of one side of him. I don't think it's typical of the really great Dickens.
Perhaps that's why we put it in.
But, well, if one, provided one's not going to laugh at it, as people do at Little Nell and so forth, it's a very powerful piece of rhetoric, I think. And he particularly, I think, had a propaganda purpose in mind when he's writing Bleak House. He got very interested in public health, attempts to control cholera and so forth. In general, he didn't believe very much in government or government interference, but he certainly did in this novel. And as I say, I think if you detach it from its context, it looks like one of his more religious deathbed scenes. But if you think of it in the whole novel, it's part of a really very admirable campaign for proper public health, proper control of
Now, that
disease.
really interests me, because I would never have thought that Dickens was what you might call interested in these social problems which he pretends to... Could I just say this? Which he pretends to be interested in. The debtors' prisons, and in his own case, the blacking factory. It's more, it seems to me, the strength of these preoccupations is the strength that might arise from a child's nightmare, rather than from a sociological document.
Well, for him, of course, the blacking shop and the debtors' prison were a child's nightmare, literally.
as well
I
as
think
everything
that
else, yes.
this extract from Bleak House is a bit untypical. He has got a real disinterested campaign about a social evil here, which he doesn't usually.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like that, does it? Does it,
I'm
Bernadine
surprised,
Bishop?
I'm surprised that you say that it's untypical Dickens. I should have thought it was
very
very typical indeed. I mean, you have the embarrassing deathbed scene, if you like, embarrassing. But on the other hand, the feeling behind it is so strong that I would have thought he rarely carries it off.
Now, could I say this? It's a particular aspect of Dickens's genius, what one might call the thespian, or the dramatic aspect in the sense of the stage. I mean, Dickens was an actor, possibly a good actor, and possibly Tale of Two Cities came into my mind because he got the idea of that, did he not, from a play originally, a play in which a man sacrificed himself for the woman he loved.
Frozen Deep.
The Frozen Deep, that was the one. Wilkie Collins and he put it on, something like that. And there was the sense of the audience, the rhetoric, and then the sudden appeal to a court, to an audience.
Yes, but A Tale of Two Cities isn't polemical like Bleak House, is it?
Well, the first chapter is, I would say. You know, it was the best of times, the worst of times.
He
It
was
obviously
very
done
interested
something.
in
Yes,
questions
yes.
of the day, and I mean, he was definitely involved and completely compassionate. One of his novels is about delays in chancery, is it not?
It's not about that at
Well,
all.
I mean, this is touched on, and for instance, the one thing which is rather moving, I think, when he wrote about that school, you know, Wackford Squares and all that, he
Yeah.
went to Yorkshire and
Didn't
went
make
round
it-
these terrible schools.
I really must
mean,
take up an argument with you here. Perhaps it's not the chairman's function, but I can't help it. He thinks he's interested in these things.
Well, why bother to trundle up on that clumsy post-chaise, which
People
we
have
know
done-
he did?
People have done stupider things than that, or, you know, and then written a book which they could have written out of their heads. He wrote it out of his head and his experience. And I think he only thought he was a social...
That's partly
his
true.
heart.
He did feel these things strongly, but he didn't really believe in social reform. He believed in the exercise of individual philanthropy. But if he'd thought about it at all, surely he would have come to him that individual philanthropy could do very little about the Yorkshire schools and about the debtors' business and so on.
Well, at the risk of being pedantic on this one, I do think Bleak House is a bit different. Dickens was very much opposed to busybodies. He was against the idea, perhaps, of government interference. But at this time, when he wrote Bleak House, this is perhaps a big anomaly in his career, he became very interested in the public boards of health which are being set up. They're being set up, this is a curious thing, by Edwin Chadwick, who was also the man who'd been more than anyone else responsible for the poorhouses, the workhouses that Dickens was getting at, in Oliver Twist, of course. In general, the kind of man that Dickens was most opposed to. But this was a period in his life when he did plunge in to genuine social reform, and this is one reason it's untypical. Of course, in a way, the kind of great and absolutely irresistible waves of self-pity that come through this passage are typical, one must admit.
Could I just ask you this, to turn off the sociological tack a little? Do you regard the feeling in this as sentiment or sentimentality?
I don't think you can use either term properly. It is a kind of cold rhetoric. It's a kind of... it is essentially an actor's pose. The actor knows perfectly well what he's doing, and he's trying to gauge the effect of his words on his audience. He's aware of his audience, he's aware of himself uttering these words. And I don't think the content matters all that much. It's the force of emotion. Feeling about the things in question doesn't really come into it.
But is it equal to the object to which it's directed, or is it in excess of it? I mean, is it sentimental, or is it equal?
It can't be an excess. The emotion can't be an excess.
It's not an excess. It's not quite genuine. It's a bit operatic because, for example, Dickens wasn't a very religious man, and he nevertheless plays on the full organ pipes of religion at his deathbed scenes. If I got a bit cross, and if I said it was untypical, it's more that I've heard Dickens laughed at so many times when this kind of passage is torn out of context. If one's looked at the character of Joe in the rest of the novel, if one has seen Chadband browbeating him, has this brother Taruth, he has not Taruth, and so forth. It's a kind of cumulative thing. I think it's much more powerful coming at the end there than it is. It sounds more sentimental, I think.
I must say, I ask because my own feeling is that it's full of sentiment. That's to say, full of a genuine, authentic feeling, however operatically deployed or
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, I think so, and I think we're wrong to feel embarrassed for Dickens when a passage like this comes out.
One doesn't, but I don't feel, I still maintain the emotion itself is not properly geared to the subject. That it is its own excuse. It's there for itself, nothing else. The Dickens is the artist in one sense here, and not the social reformer.